My mother told me my master's degree was a waste of paper. Then she drove 3 hours to watch my brother accept a Plastic Entrepreneur of the Year plaque from a local hardware club. I sat at my graduation with 2 empty seats in row 14, realizing I was officially invisible to my own blood. But exactly 7 days later, a $10 billion tech giant put a $5 million contract on my desk. Suddenly, my mother didn't think I was so pointless anymore. She called a family meeting to discuss my responsibilities. I showed up to that meeting. But I didn't come alone, and I didn't come to help. You would think that moment sitting alone at my graduation was the worst pain I ever felt. But it wasn't. That feeling had been building inside me for years, layer by layer, like dust no one ever cleans. By that day, I was already used to being unseen. The empty seats did not shock me. They just confirmed something I had known since I was a little girl. To understand why I didn't go back to help them, you need to know where it all started. I was 8 years old, sitting in a small classroom with a reading test in front of me. The paper looked normal to everyone else, but to me it felt like it was alive. The letters would not stay still. They moved, blurred, twisted into shapes that made no sense. I tried to focus harder, but the harder I tried, the worse it got. It felt like chasing something you can never catch. I remember looking around the room. Other kids were writing easily, turning pages, finishing quickly. I was stuck on the first paragraph. My hands started shaking. I thought maybe I was just slow. Maybe I was not trying hard enough. When the teacher took my paper, I could already feel the disappointment coming. But the worst part was not the test. It was what happened after. My mother was called to school. I thought she would sit with me, maybe ask what I was feeling, maybe help me understand. But she didn't. She didn't ask me a single question about what I saw or how I felt. She just listened to the teacher, nodded, and signed a form. That was it. No discussion. No second thought. On the way home, she said, "This is better for kids like you. Kids like me." I didn't even know what that meant, but I knew it wasn't good. From that day, I was placed in special education classes. And just like that, a label was put on me. Not just in school, but at home too. I was no longer the daughter who needed support. I was the problem that needed to be handled. At home, things became very clear very fast. My older brother, Leo, was everything I was not. He was confident, loud, and always praised. If he got average grades, it was celebrated. If he won something small, it became a family event. My parents would smile, take pictures, invite relatives, and talk about his bright future. And me? I learned to stay quiet. I learned that asking for help would only bring frustration. I learned that trying too hard would only make people uncomfortable. So I stopped trying to be seen. I stayed in my corner doing what I could, surviving in my own way. But something inside me never fully gave up. When I was 14, something small changed everything. It didn't look important at first. It was just an old laptop. Cracked screen, missing keys, thrown into the trash like it had no value. Leo had upgraded to a new one, so the old one didn't matter anymore. But to me, it was something else. I took it quietly and carried it to my room. Took me hours just to get it to turn on. The screen flickered, the battery barely held charge, and half the keys didn't work. But it worked enough. That night, I discovered something I had never felt before. Control. I opened a simple coding program by accident. First, it looked confusing. Just lines and symbols. But then I noticed something. Unlike books, the code did not move. It stayed still. It followed rules. It made sense. If I typed something correctly, it worked. If I made a mistake, it showed me exactly where I went wrong. There was no judgment. No labels. No one telling me I was slow or different. Just logic. So I kept going. I started using text-to-speech tools to help me understand tutorials. I listened instead of reading. I paused, repeated, tested things again and again. While my family sat in the living room watching TV, laughing together, I sat in my room building small programs. They thought I was wasting time. They thought I was playing games. They didn't know I was slowly building something real. Days turned into months. Months turned into years. I didn't tell anyone what I was learning. I didn't need their approval anymore. In fact, I preferred it that way. Silence became my safe space. At school, I was still the special ed girl. Nothing changed there. Teachers expected less from me, and I gave them exactly what they expected. Just enough to pass. Nothing more. Because my real work was happening somewhere else. At home, Leo continued to be the center of everything. Every achievement of his, no matter how small, was treated like a big victory. I remember one night very clearly. My parents threw a big celebration because he got accepted into a local community college. There were decorations, food, guests, laughter. I stayed in my room that night too. Not because I was sad, but because I was focused. While they celebrated him, I was learning something they would never understand. And that became my strength. I didn't need their attention anymore. I didn't need their belief. I was creating my own path quietly, step by step. And the funny thing is, they never even noticed. To them, I was still the same invisible daughter. But I wasn't invisible anymore. I was just waiting for the right moment to be seen. I didn't become successful overnight. It wasn't one big moment or one lucky break. It was years of quiet work, hidden effort, and learning in the dark while no one was watching. By the time I reached high school, I had already learned more from that broken laptop than I had from most of my classes. But no one knew. I kept everything to myself. Not because I was hiding it, but because I had learned something important. People only listen when they already believe in you. And no one believed in me. So I stopped trying to prove anything to them. Instead, I focused on building something real. Every night I would sit with my headphones on, listening to tutorials, practicing code, making mistakes, fixing them and trying again. Sometimes I would stay awake until 2 or 3 in the morning, even when I had school the next day. I didn't care about being tired. For the first time in my life, my mind felt clear. Code didn't confuse me. It made sense. I started with simple programs, small things, a calculator, a basic game. Then I moved to bigger ideas. I began to understand how systems worked, how data moved, how logic connected everything together. And slowly I got better. But outside my room, nothing changed. At school, teachers still spoke to me like I couldn't understand. They used simple words, slow tones, like I was always behind. I stopped correcting them. It was easier to let them believe that. At home, my parents never once asked what I was doing on that laptop. Not once. Their attention was always somewhere else, mostly on Leo. Leo had this way of making everything about him. Even when he failed, somehow it turned into a story where he was still the hero. If he didn't do well, it was because the system was unfair. If he didn't try, it was because he had bigger plans. And my parents believed him every time. I remember one evening when I was about 16. Leo had started talking about opening his own business. He had no real plan, no experience, nothing solid. But my parents were already excited. They sat at the dinner table discussing ideas, giving him advice, talking about loans and investments. I was sitting right there. No one asked what I thought. No one even looked at me. At some point, my father turned to me and said, "You should learn from your brother. He has ambition." I didn't say anything, because I knew something they didn't. Ambition without action means nothing. And while Leo was talking, I was doing. Years passed like that. Quietly. Slowly. But everything was building towards something bigger. When it came time for college, no one expected much from me. My parents assumed I would choose something easy, or maybe not go at all. They didn't even sit down with me to discuss options. So I handled everything myself. Applications, forms, deadlines. It wasn't easy. Reading long documents was still a struggle. I had to listen to everything through audio tools, replaying information again and again until I understood it. But I didn't give up, because by then I knew exactly what I wanted. Computer science. When I got accepted into a university, I told my parents at dinner. My mother's reaction? "Oh, that sounds difficult for you." That was it. No excitement. No pride. Just doubt. My father didn't say much either. He just nodded and changed the subject to Leo's new business idea. And that was the moment I fully understood something. I was on my own. Completely. College was one of the hardest things I have ever done. Not because I wasn't capable, but because everything took more effort for me than for others. Reading textbooks was exhausting. Long exams were stressful. Group projects were uncomfortable because I had to hide how I processed information differently. But I didn't quit. I worked twice as hard as everyone else. If a lecture was 1 hour, I spent 3 hours reviewing it. If an assignment took others 1 day, it took me 3. But I kept going, because I had already spent years training myself to not give up. During that time, I didn't get many calls from home. First, I tried. I would call my mother, ask how things were, try to share small updates about my studies. But the conversations never lasted long. She always seemed distracted, or busy, or uninterested. Sometimes she would pass the phone to my father, who would quickly say, "That's good, keep working," and hang up. And Leo? He only called when he needed something. "Hey, can you check my website? Hey, my email isn't working. Hey, I need help with this payment system." I always helped, not because I expected anything in return, but because they were still my family, even if I wasn't treated like one. As time passed, I stopped calling as much. Not out of anger, but out of understanding. You can't force people to care. So I focused on what I could control. My work. In my final year, something started to change. I began working on a project that would later become everything. It started as a simple idea. Video files are huge. Streaming them takes a lot of data. I wanted to find a way to compress video more efficiently without losing quality. First, it was just an experiment. But then it started working. Better than I expected. I spent months improving it. Testing different models. Writing and rewriting code. Fixing bugs. Starting over when things failed. There were nights I almost gave up. Moments where I felt like I was too tired, too overwhelmed. But I kept going. Because deep down I knew this was different. This wasn't just another assignment. This was something real. Something valuable. When I finally completed my master's degree, it felt unreal. Not because I doubted myself, but because I had done it alone. No support. No encouragement. Just years of quiet effort. I invited my parents to my graduation. I even sent them the details twice. My mother's response came a day later. "It's a long drive for just a ceremony." That was all she said. I didn't reply. And on the day of my graduation, I sat there in my gown, surrounded by families celebrating together, cheering, taking pictures, and next to me were 2 empty seats. I looked at them for a long time. Then I looked forward, because something inside me had finally changed. I wasn't waiting for them anymore. Not for their approval. Not for their presence. Not for anything. Because I had already built something they didn't understand. And soon the world was about to notice. After graduation, I didn't take a break. I didn't celebrate. I didn't even post a single picture. While everyone else was uploading smiling photos with their families, I went back to my small apartment, opened my laptop, and continued working. Because I knew something they didn't. I was close. Very close. I had already started working at a small startup during my final year. It wasn't a big company. No fancy office. No huge salary. Just a few people trying to build something meaningful. That's exactly why I chose it. No one there cared about labels. No one treated me like I was less. They only cared about one thing, what I could do. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. During the day, I worked on their projects. Clean code. Fix bugs. Build features. Learn from others. But at night, I returned to my own work. The algorithm. My video compression system. What started as a simple idea had now turned into something powerful. It wasn't perfect yet, but it was different. Faster. Smarter. More efficient than anything I had tested before. I didn't tell anyone at work. Not yet. This was mine. Something I had built from nothing. Something that came from years of being ignored, underestimated, and left alone. Every night I pushed it further. I tested it on different types of video. High quality, low quality, fast motion, slow scenes. I broke it, fixed it, rebuilt it again. Sometimes it failed completely and I had to start from scratch. But every failure taught me something. And slowly it became better. One night, after weeks of testing, I ran a final comparison. My system versus a standard compression tool. Same video. Same conditions. When the results came in, I just stared at the screen. My version was smaller in size, but the quality looked almost identical. I ran it again. Same result. Again. Same. I leaned back in my chair, heart beating fast. For the first time, I allowed myself to think something I had never said out loud before. This is big. But I didn't rush. I didn't tell my family. I didn't post online. I didn't celebrate. Instead, I did what I always do. I worked more. I cleaned the code, organized everything, documented every detail. I wanted it to be perfect before anyone else saw it. Then one day I made a decision. I sent it out. Not to everyone. Just a few companies. Quietly. No big announcement. No expectations. Just a simple email explaining what I had built with a demo attached. And then, I waited. Days passed. Nothing. A week passed. Still nothing. I wasn't surprised. I had learned long ago not to expect quick recognition. So I kept working, kept improving, kept moving forward. Then on the 7th day, an email came. I almost didn't open it right away. I thought it was just another automated reply. But when I finally clicked it, everything changed. It was from a company called Nexus Infrastructure. A name I recognized instantly. A $10 billion tech company. My hands froze for a second. Then I started reading. They had reviewed my work. They wanted a meeting. I read the email 3 times just to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding. They didn't just like it. They were interested. Very interested. The meeting was scheduled for the next day. That night I barely slept. Not because I was nervous, but because my mind was racing. I kept thinking about everything that had led to this moment. All the nights. All the silence. All the times I had been ignored. And now, someone had finally seen it. The next day I joined the meeting. 3 people were there. Senior engineers. A project lead. Serious faces. Focused eyes. They asked questions. Detailed ones. How it worked. Why it worked. What made it different. What problems it solved. And I answered every single one. Clearly. Calmly. Confidently. Because for the first time I wasn't trying to prove myself. I was explaining something I truly understood. By the end of the call, there was a short silence. Then one of them said, "We want this." Just like that. No hesitation. No doubt. They wanted to license my algorithm. And not just that. They wanted me to lead a new division built around it. I felt something shift inside me. Not excitement. Not even happiness. Something deeper. Validation. Not from my family, but from the world. A few days later, the official offer arrived. $5 million. I stared at the number for a long time. Not because of the money, but because of what it represented. Every moment I had been ignored. Every time I was treated like I didn't matter. Every empty seat. Every quiet night. It all led here. I signed the contract. But I didn't tell my family. Not immediately. I didn't feel the need to, because this wasn't for them. But news has a way of spreading, especially when something big happens. A few days later, my phone rang. It was my mother. I looked at the screen for a long time before answering. When I finally picked up, her voice sounded different. Softer. Warmer. Almost like she was talking to someone important. "I heard about your work," she said. I stayed quiet. "We're very proud of you," she added. We. That word felt strange. Because for years there had been no we. Just me. But I didn't argue. I didn't question it. I just listened. Then she said something that made everything clear. "We should have a family meeting. There are things we need to discuss. Your responsibilities." Responsibilities. That word again. Only this time it had a different meaning. I knew exactly what was coming. I had seen this pattern before. But this time, I wasn't the same person anymore. I agreed to come. Calmly. Without emotion. Because I already knew. This meeting wasn't about family. It was about something else. And I was ready. When I agreed to go back home, I already knew what I was walking into. Nothing about that invitation felt real. It wasn't love. It wasn't pride. It wasn't even curiosity about my life. It was something much simpler. They needed something. And for the first time, I had something they wanted. The drive back felt longer than I remembered. Every road, every turn, every familiar building brought back memories I had tried to leave behind. But this time, I wasn't that same quiet girl sitting in the back seat, hoping someone would notice her. This time I was walking in with clarity. When I reached the house, nothing had changed. Same walls, same furniture, same feeling. It was strange how a place could look exactly the same but feel completely different. My mother opened the door, and for a moment, she smiled like everything was normal, like nothing had ever happened, like there were no empty seats at my graduation, like there were no years of silence between us. "You look well," she said softly. I nodded. That was all. No hug, no real emotion, just politeness. I stepped inside, and the first thing I noticed was the smell. My brother's favorite meal. Of course, it was almost predictable. We moved into the dining room, and there he was, Leo, sitting comfortably, leaning back in his chair like he owned the place. He gave me a quick look, half a smile, the kind that wasn't really warm, more like calculated. "Hey," he said. "Hey," I replied. And that was it. No excitement. No real connection. Just two people who happened to share the same house once. My father was already seated. He looked older, more tired. But his expression was the same as always, serious, distant, unreadable. And at the end of the table sat my grandfather, quiet, watching. We all sat down. For the first 30 minutes, they talked about everything except the real reason I was there. My mother spoke about neighbors, small updates, random stories. My father added a few comments here and there. Leo talked about his business, using big words, making it sound impressive. I listened. I didn't interrupt, because I knew this part. This was how it always started. They built comfort first. Then came the ask. Finally, my mother looked at me. "So, we heard about your deal," she said, trying to sound casual. I nodded. "That's very impressive," she added. There was a small pause. Then my father leaned forward slightly. "We're proud of you," he said. The words sounded correct, but they didn't feel real. Not after everything. Not after years of silence. Still, I said nothing. I just waited. And then it came. Leo cleared his throat and leaned in. "So things have been a little tough lately," he started. Of course. I kept my face calm. "My store had hit a rough patch," he continued. "Some bad decisions, some unexpected costs. I didn't need the details. I already knew where this was going. My father took over. There's about 200,000 in debt," he said directly. The room went quiet. My mother looked at me, her eyes soft again. "We didn't want to worry you," she said. Worry me. That was interesting, because they had never worried about me. Not once. My grandfather finally spoke. "Family supports each other," he said slowly. "That's how it should be." There it was. The expectation. Clear. Heavy. Unspoken but obvious. Then my father added the final piece. "To keep the business running, I used the house as collateral," he admitted. I looked at him. Really looked. "Foreclosure is in 6 months if we don't fix this," he said. And just like that, everything was on the table. The house. The business. The debt. And me. They all looked at me now. Waiting. Not asking. Expecting. Like it was already decided. Like my role in this situation was automatic. Like I was just the solution. "It's what family does," my grandfather repeated. I let the silence sit for a moment. Then I slowly reached into my bag. No anger. No raised voice. No emotion. Just calm. I pulled out a folder and placed it on the table. They all looked at it, confused. "What's that?" Leo asked. I opened it. Inside were printed pages. Organized. Dated. Clear. I looked down at the first page. And then I started speaking. "March 2006, I said quietly. Mother signs papers moving me into special education without discussion. My mother's face changed slightly. August 2016, I continued. Father drops me at college. No conversation. No support. My father shifted in his seat. May 2022, I said. Graduation day. 2 empty seats. No calls. No message. The room felt colder now. No one spoke. I turned another page. 47 outgoing calls from me over 2 years. I read. 0 incoming calls that were not requests for help or money. Leo looked uncomfortable now. My mother's eyes dropped. My father stayed still. I closed the folder slowly. This is my record, I said. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. Then I looked up. For years I tried to be part of this family, I continued. I tried to connect, to share, to belong. My voice didn't shake, because this wasn't anger. It was clarity. But I was never included, I said. Not really. My mother finally spoke, her voice softer now. We didn't realize. I raised my hand slightly, not aggressive, just enough to stop her. It's okay, I said. And I meant it, because I had already accepted it. I reached into my bag again, and this time I pulled out a second document. Thicker. Official. I placed it on the table. My attorney, who had been quietly standing near the door, stepped forward. That's when they realized. This wasn't a conversation. This was something else. This is a voluntary relinquishment, I said calmly. It removes me from any future financial obligations to this family. It also removes my claim to any inheritance. My mother looked shocked. My father frowned. Leo leaned forward. What are you doing? He asked. I met his eyes. I'm setting things clear, I replied. My grandfather's voice was sharper now. You would turn your back on your family? I shook my head slightly. No, I said. I'm just accepting the role I've always had. Silence again. No one had a response to that. I stood up slowly. I'm not here to save the house, I said. I looked at each of them, one by one. I'm here to close this chapter. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible. I felt free. I walked out of that house without looking back. Not because I was angry, but because there was nothing left to look at. For years, I had imagined what it would feel like to finally be seen by my family. I thought maybe one day they would understand me, maybe one day they would say they were wrong, maybe one day things would feel normal. But standing there, after everything had been said, I realized something simple. That day was never coming. And strangely, I was okay with that. The air outside felt different, lighter, like something heavy had finally been taken off my shoulders. I didn't rush to my car. I didn't feel the need to escape. I just stood there for a moment, breathing, letting the silence settle inside me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for them. Not for a call. Not for approval. Not for anything. I got into my car and drove away, and that was it. No dramatic ending. No one running after me. No last-minute apology. Just a quiet, clean break. In the weeks that followed, I focused on my work. Nexus infrastructure moved fast. They had already started building a full team around my algorithm, and I was now leading it. Me, the girl who was once told she was slow, now leading engineers making decisions, building something that would be used all over the world. It still felt unreal sometimes, but not in a doubtful way. More like a quiet confirmation. This is where I was always meant to be. The money came in, the contracts were finalized, and my life changed in ways I had never imagined. But the most important change wasn't the money. It was the freedom. Freedom to choose who I wanted in my life. Freedom to build something meaningful. Freedom to finally exist without trying to prove anything to anyone. A few months later, I moved to San Francisco. A new city. A new start. No memories attached to it. No past following me around. Just space to grow. My apartment was small, but it was mine. Every corner of it felt earned. Every quiet morning, every late night, every cup of coffee, it all belonged to me. And slowly I started building something new. not just for myself, but for others like me. I named it Project Ellison. It wasn't just a tech project. It was something personal, an open-source tool designed to help kids with dyslexia learn in a way that actually works for them. Tools that use audio, visual patterns, logic, things that made sense to minds like mine. Because I knew what it felt like to sit in a classroom and feel wrong. I knew what it felt like to be labeled before being understood. And I didn't want anyone else to go through that alone. So I built something I wish I had when I was 8. Something that says, "You're not broken. You just learn differently." The project started small. Just a few users, a few testers. But it grew quickly. Because there were so many people who needed it. People who had been ignored, overlooked, misunderstood. Just like me. One evening after a long day of work, I was sitting by my window, looking at the city lights when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. It was my father. For a moment I just stared at it. Not surprised. Not emotional. Just aware. I let it ring. Then it stopped. A few seconds later a message came through. "I understand now." That was all it said. No long explanation. No apology. Just those 3 words. I read it once. Then again. And for a moment I felt something shift inside me. Not pain. Not anger. Something softer. Closure. Because those words, they came too late. But they still mattered. In a different way. They didn't change the past. They didn't fix anything. But they confirmed something I had already learned. Sometimes people understand only after they lose you. I didn't reply. Not because I wanted to punish him, but because I didn't need to say anything anymore. The silence this time was mine. And it felt different. Peaceful. Complete. A year later, I heard that Leo's store had closed. The debt had caught up. The house was gone. My parents had moved into a smaller place. Life had changed for them too. But I didn't feel satisfaction hearing that. No revenge. No happiness. Just distance. Because their story was no longer mine. I had my own life now. A real one. Built on something solid. Not expectations. Not approval. But truth. Sometimes people ask me if I regret it. If I regret not helping. If I regret walking away. And I always give the same answer. No. Because walking away wasn't the moment I lost my family. That happened years earlier. When I was still there. And they chose not to see me. Walking away was just the moment I chose myself. And that made all the difference. Today my life is full of people who see me. Who listen. Who understand. Not because they have to. But because they want to. And that is something I never had before. My brain was never broken. Just worked in a different way. A way my family didn't understand. But the world did. And once I found that place, I never looked back. So if you are out there, feeling invisible, feeling overlooked by the very people who are supposed to love you, remember this. Your value is not decided by who fails to see it. Your worth does not depend on their approval. And one day when you find your place, when your work speaks, when your voice is heard, you will realize something powerful. You were never invisible. You were just surrounded by people who refused to look. And the moment you stop waiting for them is the moment your real life begins.